You feel it before you see it, the wind howling like a banshee across an endless sheet of white. Snow pierces your skin like knives. There are no walls, no fire, no mercy. Just you, a crude spear, and the raw edge of extinction. You clutch the fur of a beast you barely remember killing, hoping it will stop the cold from creeping deeper into your bones. But it's not enough. Not for this storm. You don't know how long you've been out here. Hours. Days. All you know is this. If you don't learn how your ancestors survived this frozen hellscape, how they clothed themselves against the unforgiving ice age, you won't make it through the night. This isn't about fashion. This is about fire trapped in fur. It's about tools older than language. It's about the secrets your DNA still remembers, but your mind forgot. So, what did cavemen actually wear? And how did it keep them alive when the earth turned to ice? You arrive shivering, not just from cold, from something deeper. A primal vulnerability that hums in your bones, in your lungs, in the thin film of moisture that's already freezing on your skin. You've just been born into a world that doesn't care if you live. There are no blankets, no hospital lights, just ice, wind, and a mother holding you close, her body the only thing keeping yours from slipping into the dark. Your skin is soft, too soft. The wind peels it open like paper. There is no fur to protect you, no shell to retreat into. You're exposed, naked in a world sculpted by glaciers where the sky feels heavy with frost and the ground crunches like glass beneath bare feet. This is the Pleistocene, the Ice Age. And here the cold isn't just a condition, it's a predator. It waits in the shadows, it chews through the careless. You don't yet know how to walk, but you already know what death feels like. It's in the absence of warmth. It's in the still bodies the adults don't speak of. You don't remember their names, but you remember the way your mother gripped you tighter when they stopped breathing. There is no margin for error in this world. You're born into a species that shouldn't have made it. You're too slow, too hairless, too exposed. Other creatures grow fur. They grow thick layers of insulating fat. They hibernate, migrate, adapt with instincts burned into their flesh. But not you. So why are you here? Why did your ancestors survive, and how? The answer begins with the cold, but not just the chill in the air. The cold inside your cells. The cold that forced your kind to think differently, to act with urgency, to create something no other species had ever invented before, a second skin. But that second skin, clothing, doesn't exist yet. Not for you. You're too early. You live in the Paleolithic, where survival depends on speed, intuition, and shared memory passed from fire to fire. Your body is still tropical, still wired for warmth and humidity. And yet you've been cast into a world ruled by storms that can turn forests into glass overnight. You don't remember the moment the first frostbite set in, but your tribe does. They've seen it. Fingers blackening, toes curling into silence. Infants who didn't wake. The ones who did survive, they learned fast. They watched how animals moved through the cold. They skinned wolves not for meat, but for the magic of warmth buried inside their pelts. They began to learn that survival wasn't about strength. It was about surface area, heat loss, water resistance, the math of staying alive. But evolution doesn't wait politely. It punishes hesitation. You are Homo sapiens, a child of the savannah, barefooted, heat-adapted. But not alone. There are others here, heavy-boned, wide-nosed, coated in thick muscle and built for the freeze, Neanderthals. You see them sometimes from a distance. Broad faces lit by the same fire you huddle near. They were born in the cold, raised in it. Their ancestors never left it. Their bodies are shorter, stockier, designed by natural selection to hold heat like furnaces. And they've lived here for hundreds of thousands of years. You wonder, why not them? Why didn't they inherit the future? Because something was changing, and not just in the weather. You feel it in your fingers, the need to grasp, to pull, to shape. Your hands aren't just for holding, they're for making. You see the scrape marks on the bones of hunted animals, the careful slices where flesh was removed not just for eating but for wrapping. You watch the elders soften hide by hand, pounding and stretching and soaking it with ash or brains, ancient alchemy that transforms stinking skin into pliable fabric. You smell it. You taste it in the air. These are not luxuries. These are weapons against winter, because without them, your own body betrays you. You lose heat through your scalp first, then your fingers, then your chest, your core, your thighs. The blood pulls back, clenching inwards, starving your limbs to protect the heart. You go pale, you go slow, you stop caring, and then you sleep. The cold wants you to sleep. But someone shakes you, wraps you in fur, pushes warm hands against your ribs, you cough, you wake. And you learn. You learn that mammoth hide must be dried in smoke to prevent it from stiffening. That sinew thread, stripped from tendon, is stronger than anything you can weave. That layering works, not because of the thickness, but because of the tiny air pockets that trap warmth. You learn that this knowledge isn't passed through words, it's passed through doing. Your hands become your textbooks. Your memory lives in the motion of scraping, wrapping, stitching. You wear your first hide before you know what language is, and it keeps you alive. But clothing, true clothing, doesn't come all at once. It evolves, piece by piece. Wrappings around the feet, a belt to hold tools, a hood sewn not for beauty but to keep the wind from cutting your ears. Still, you are not safe. Your species doesn't live deep in caves like bears. You build shelters from mammoth bones, hide, wood, snow. But even these fail when the ice turns to razors in the wind. You must carry warmth with you, on you, in layers you can adjust. You begin to understand clothing isn't just a barrier, it's a system, a tool set, a thinking process stitched from the tension between flesh and frost. And you are now its student. Because you were born naked, but you won't die that way. You will craft your second skin not from instinct but from insight, from fire, from memory. And when the next child is born into your tribe, shivering in the dark, you will be the one wrapping them in the knowledge that saved you. You're beginning to see now. This isn't about what cavemen wore. It's about how the cold carved humanity into what it is, and why the ones who learn to wear warmth like armor are the ones who lived long enough to pass on the thread. But before you can master what clothing became, you must understand why skin was never enough. You start to notice it when the fire dies. First, it's the numbness in your fingers, then the trembling, the way your jaw clenches without permission, your muscles tensing in waves just to keep your core temperature from slipping too far. But the cold doesn't come all at once. It peels you apart slowly, methodically, like it knows you better than you know yourself. You've probably never thought much about your skin, but here in the Ice Age it's not protection, it's a gap, a flaw, a whisper of something once meant for another world. Your ancestors emerged in the tropics where bare skin radiated excess heat into the open air, where sweat was a gift, not a curse. But now you're standing beneath a sky of ice, and your skin is doing the one thing it was never meant to, trying to hold in warmth. It can't. The numbers, if you could calculate them, would terrify you. In a cold wind, moving at just 10 miles per hour, your body loses heat as if it were 20 degrees colder than the air. Wet skin loses heat 25 times faster than dry skin. Stand naked in sub-zero temperatures, and you'll start to die in minutes. Your core temperature only needs to fall by 2 degrees C for you to start shivering uncontrollably. A 5 degrees C drop, and your brain begins to slow, misfire, forget. You stumble, you sit, you stop resisting. That's hypothermia, and once it begins, it's hard to undo without help, or without something more than skin. But the Ice Age didn't offer help. It offered choices: adapt or disappear. And so, slowly, your species began to experiment. Not with tools, not with weapons, not yet, but with warmth, with heat loss, with the invisible laws of physics that govern life and death. Somewhere along the line, you notice that pressed bodies share heat, that curling up in the fetal position, the same shape you arrived in, slows the loss. You noticed which surfaces felt colder, how metal, if you had any, steals warmth faster than bone or hide. You learned that wind strips heat faster than still air, and that wet skin kills faster than dry. You couldn't name convection, conduction, or radiation, but you knew them in your bones. You also noticed something else. Certain places on the body froze first. The fingers, the toes, the tips of ears and noses. Your blood, loyal to your core, retreats from the limbs when the cold comes calling. It prioritizes the heart, the lungs, the brain. You survive, but at a cost. Digits blacken, tissue dies. Pain becomes a permanent companion. And so your ancestors began to solve a puzzle no other animal had faced. Not how to survive with fur, but how to survive without it. The earliest hints are barely whispers, traces of red ochre rubbed into the skin not for decoration but possibly to trap warmth or act as a primitive UV blocker, maybe even insect repellent, maybe ritual. But rituals are born of necessity, and necessity here was warmth. Some even speculate that ochre was an early proxy for awareness. I know my skin matters. I know it's not enough. And then there are the fibers, impressions left in the dirt beside bones. Plant strands twisted together, corded like sinew, wrapped around wrists or ankles. If they were used, it wasn't for style. It was for insulation. Maybe your ancestors layered them under hide. Maybe they wrapped them around vulnerable joints. Not clothing yet, but a beginning. A question stretching across time. What else can we wrap around the body to stop the cold from winning? By now, you've felt what happens when you go without. You've lost the fire. The wind howls. Your skin begins to betray you. Every breath you exhale is a little bit of your warmth, turned to steam and stolen by the air. Your body is waging a silent war, converting food into energy, blood into heat, heat into survival. But it's losing ground. And suddenly you realize this isn't just about having materials. It's about understanding how heat moves, what blocks it, What holds it? What traps it close to the skin without suffocating you? You begin to look at the world differently. A mammoth's thick, layered hide isn't just a surface, it's a blueprint. A rabbit's fur isn't just soft, it's structured insulation with underlayers that trap still air. Even the snow, when packed right, becomes a shelter. Not because it's warm, but because it stops wind, holds stillness. Stillness is warmth. You start testing. You notice that layers work better than bulk, that two thin hides trap more warmth than one thick one. That seams matter. A breeze through a tiny hole can undo all your work. You experiment with binding sinew, rawhide reeds. You learn that moisture ruins everything, that if a hide gets wet and then freezes, it becomes a death sentence. This is more than survival. This is knowledge. Slow, painful, embodied science passed down not with equations but with scars. And you start to see the human body differently too, not as a failure of evolution but as a blank slate. A system designed not to adapt through fur or fat, but through culture, through behavior, through innovation. The brain became your species' insulation. Your hands became the tools that wove your second skin. And yet, even as you learned to guard your body, your skin still mattered, because it taught you where you were weak. It became your sensory map, a feedback loop for pressure, pain, cold, heat. It didn't shield you, it spoke to you. Every shiver, every goosebump, every moment your breath fogged the air was your skin whispering, "Not enough, not yet, keep going." And so you kept going. You kept adding not just layers but ideas. Clothing became more than warmth. It became memory. It became design. Soon you would shape garments with intention, tighter around the chest, looser at the joints, hooded at the crown. You would become the first creature in history to clothe itself by choice, not instinct. But not yet. First, you had to learn why the body alone couldn't survive, why the elements always won, unless you changed the rules. And now you're ready. You've felt what it means to lose heat. You've tasted the edge of hypothermia. You've seen how ochre and fiber and fur were more than materials, they were ideas. And the next idea will change everything. You're not just wrapping your body anymore. You're about to engineer warmth. You've killed the beast, but it's not over, not even close. The carcass steams beneath you, warm, wet, massive. Your hands are trembling, half from adrenaline, half from the creeping return of cold. But instinct tells you what logic hasn't yet learned. If you don't move fast, the warmth will vanish. The body will stiffen. The opportunity will be lost. Because you didn't just kill for food. You killed for shelter, for survival, for the skin. And skin isn't something you can just slip into. You reach for the tool, a flake of obsidian, razor-sharp, brittle as ice. You didn't make it by accident. You chipped it with precision, striking angles until it fractured just right. Because here, in the Ice Age, your first needle was a blade, and your first garment wasn't woven. It was carved. The hide is thick, too thick. It clings to muscle, wet with blood and connective tissue. Pulling it tears nothing. You have to work with care, slice just beneath the surface. Keep the blade flat. Every stroke has to count a waste movement, and you waste warmth. You begin to understand what your ancestors learned through necessity. Skin is a system. If you destroy it, you destroy its usefulness. If you preserve its layers, you preserve its power. You cut along the belly where the hide is thinner, then the limbs. Then you peel inch by inch, separating the living from the dead. The fat clings, the meat hangs, but you're not hunting calories now, you're hunting insulation. And once it's off, you still can't wear it. Raw hide is heavy. It freezes stiff when wet, folds awkwardly, cracks when cold. It's a liability unless you know what to do next. So you begin the process that changed everything. You begin to work the skin. You scrape. First with a stone scraper, its edge duller than obsidian but perfect for pushing fat and tissue from the inner surface of the hide. Your hands are sore. Your knuckles split in the cold. But you keep going because every gram of moisture left inside is a future weakness. Fat rots. Water freezes. You have to reduce the hide to its core, the fibrous, flexible membrane that might one day bend around a shoulder or cradle a foot. But it's not soft yet. You smoke it. You hang it above a smoldering fire, watching as the tendrils of smoke weave into the fibers. The aldehydes in the smoke bond with collagen, preserving it, waterproofing it, stiffening it just enough to repel rain. This isn't guesswork. This is chemistry, the first time in history that humans altered the molecular nature of the world to survive. Or maybe you use brains instead. You boil them down, mash them, rub them into the hide with your palms. Every animal has just enough brain to tan its own skin. Your ancestors figured that out somehow, long before the science caught up. They turned the internal into external. The organ that once thought became the armor that would protect. You soak it, stretch it, wring it, over and over. Tanning isn't a moment, it's a process. A day-long, week-long relationship with the body of the animal you've taken. You don't take it lightly. This is time stolen from the cold, time borrowed from death. And when it's finally dry, not brittle, not stiff, you realize it's still not clothing. You need to shape it, stitch it, bend it into form. So you pierce it. Not with a knife, but with an awl, a sharpened sliver of bone, strong enough to punch holes through leather without tearing it. Your fingers numb as you push the awl through, twist it slightly, pull it back, hole after hole, and then comes the sinew. Not thread, not string. Sinew, the tendons of the same animal, stripped, dried, and soaked until they flex like wire and shrink tight as they dry. You thread it through, pull it taut. The seam closes like a wound. You don't sew for beauty. You sew for survival. Every stitch is a seal. Every gap a place for wind to slip through and undo your work. You learn to double stitch, to overlap seams, to fold edges inward so water runs off instead of in. What you're making is not fashion, it's engineering. This is warmth made visible. This is structure wrapped around flesh. You're crafting a second skin, one that doesn't feel but protects, that doesn't breathe but shields. And this is where clothing is born. Not in looms, not in markets, not in mirrors. In the blood and smoke of necessity. But it goes further. Soon you realize that not all hides are equal. The soft inner fur of a reindeer keeps warmth better than the thick pelt of a mammoth. Fox fur is lighter, more flexible. Rabbit fur insulates but disintegrates if not layered. You begin to specialize, to combine. Fur inward for warmth, hide outward for wind. You invent the parka before you know the word. You start crafting for movement, sleeves that narrow at the wrist, leggings that tie at the ankle. You cut slits, add drawstrings of gut or leather thong. You're inventing fit. You're inventing form, not for comfort, for function. A loose garment leaks warmth. A tight one restricts blood flow. You balance, adjust, observe. Every part of this is learned. Nothing is instinctual. No animal does this. No animal can. But you can, because you are the only creature who turned death into a tool. And now you understand. You don't wear the hide to become warm. You make it warm, you transform it. From carcass to canvas, from flesh to fabric. And in doing so, you cross a line that no other species has crossed. You've become a maker not just of tools, but of shelter, mobile, wearable, engineered against extinction. And still, this is only the beginning. Because now that you've made clothing, you have to figure out how to make it last. You wake before the sun. The sky is dark steel. The ground crunches beneath your feet and your breath curls upward in coils of silver mist. It's 30 below, not wind-chill temperature. You exhale and it bites. You blink and your eyelashes freeze together. You are a mammoth hunter, and your life depends on what you're wearing. You pull your hood tighter, not made of cloth, but of reindeer hide, fur turned inward, the skin shaped to your skull, stitched so precisely with sinew that not a breath of air slips through. No buttons, no zippers, just tension, pressure, drawstrings of rawhide that cinch across your jawline like a second muscle. Your tunic is not a shirt, it's a fortress. Double-layered caribou hide, inner fur for warmth, outer skin to cut the wind. It's stitched with reverse seams, folded inward so that nothing catches the breeze. The shoulders overlap, designed to shed snow like a rooftop. You feel your own body heat captured between layers, not sweating but circulating, warming you like a portable hearth. You think you're wrapped in fashion. You're wrapped in decisions. Over your legs, you wear hide leggings cut separately for flexibility, bound at the knees and ankles with sinew cord. The seams run along the sides, not the front, to avoid chafing during long treks across ice. Beneath those, inner trousers of soft rabbit fur, layered against your skin like thermal underwear. You don't wear one pair of pants. You wear a system, insulation in motion. Then the boots. No part of your body is closer to death than your feet. So you wrap them in magic. First comes the grass, dried, shredded, tucked between your toes, absorbing sweat, insulating like primitive wool. Then comes the inner slipper, soft hide, fur inward. Then the outer boot, reinforced at the sole with thicker skin, sometimes even rawhide stiffened by water and cold. No modern material beats it. Not rubber, not nylon, not plastic. Your boots flex just enough to move, just enough to grip, and just enough to trap warmth in a world where the earth is colder than the sky. And they're not just boots, they're time capsules. Archaeologists found them in the ice with Ötzi, the Iceman frozen for 5,000 years in the Alps. His shoes had soles of bearskin, netting made of bark fiber, and hay stuffed inside for warmth. Primitive? No, purpose-built. Evidence of a mind engineering against extinction. Around your waist, a belt. Not leather but twisted sinew or plant fiber. On it hang tools, a scraper for hides, a small flint knife. sometimes even a pouch made from a reindeer's stomach to keep dry tinder alive. Clothing didn't just protect, it carried. It extended your hands, your fire, your memory. You wear gloves, yes, but not mittens stitched on an assembly line. You wear fur mitts lined with squirrel skin, cuffs that stretch past the wrist, bound tightly to your sleeves. If even a sliver of skin shows, you'll lose the hand in a matter of hours. So you learn the art of sealing clothing not as accessory, but as enclosure. And over it all, your cloak. Made from the full hide of a reindeer or mammoth calf, the cloak is your final barrier. It's not cut to fit, it drapes, it wraps, it's a shell. The fur faces in, trapping warmth. The outer layer blocks snow and wind. When you sleep, it becomes a blanket. When you walk, it moves like shadow. But what you're wearing isn't just function. It's culture. The cape might be decorated with pigment or carved bone toggles. The hood might be trimmed with fox fur, not for beauty, but because fox fur resists frost better around the lips and cheeks. Every material tells a story of the landscape. Every stitch is a memory passed down through blood and breath. You've seen glimpses of this in burials from Siberia, children wrapped in reindeer hide, hands folded beneath fur capes, boots still lined with moss. Or in the Sungir site in Russia, where two Paleolithic boys were buried in mammoth ivory beads stitched into their garments, tens of thousands of them, the work of hundreds of hours, passed down like sacred engineering. This is not minimalism. This is investment. You don't wear fast fashion here. You wear legacy. The Inuit call it layering. Your ancestors didn't use the term, but they invented the concept. Each piece of clothing had a thermal role, moisture control, wind protection, insulation, breathability. They didn't need Gore-Tex. They had biology. They used animal bodies not just as material, but as templates. What works for the caribou can work for the human if you learn, adapt, transform. And thread. Let's talk about thread. Modern nylon snaps under stress. Sinew does not. Sinew shrinks as it dries, tightening seams into waterproof bonds. You don't need glue. You don't need tape. Your ancestors figured out the tensile properties of tendon long before tensile strength had a name. Every piece of what you're wearing was tested under pressure, not in a lab but on a glacier. Every failure meant frostbite. Every success became tradition. So now look at yourself. You're not just dressed, you're armored, not against spears or teeth but against silence, stillness, cold that kills without a sound. And yet you start to feel something. Not the cold is gone, you are warm, you are insulated. But you're not invulnerable. Because in this world, survival isn't just about staying warm. It's about staying dry, staying mobile, staying human in a place designed to erase you. And something is coming. A storm, a migration, a new kind of cold. You don't know yet. But you will. Because next, you'll learn the ultimate truth of ancient clothing. It wasn't just worn. It was lived in. It was survival, stitched into every fiber of your being. You look down at what you're wearing. It keeps you warm, it keeps you alive, but now, it does something else. There's a strip of red ochre rubbed into the hem of your tunic, a shell bead tied near the collar, a sliver of bird bone dyed with charcoal dangling from your belt. These things don't make you warmer. They don't help you hunt. So why are they there? The truth hits you slowly, like thawing fingers. You're not just surviving anymore. You're becoming something else, someone else. You're signaling, you're expressing. And for the first time, you begin to matter to others in a new way, not just as muscle or warmth or help around the fire, but as you. This is the moment clothing stops being armor and starts becoming language. You may not have words for it yet, but your hands know. Your gestures speak. When you loop a specific knot into a sash, others notice. When you wrap your cloak a certain way, fur out or fur in, it says who you are, or maybe who you aspire to be. And soon others begin to copy, or challenge, or flirt. This is how culture starts, not with speeches but with stitches. You begin to notice the variation. A hunter from the next valley wears eagle feathers braided into his hood. A woman from another group arrives at the seasonal gathering in a wrap dyed deep ochre, the red of iron, of blood, of birth. Her belt carries polished shells from hundreds of miles away. You stare, you remember, you imitate. Because in this world, attention is currency. And clothing has become a message, worn directly on the skin, broadcast without sound. You're entering the era of symbolic dress, not decoration for its own sake, but expression fused with identity. A reindeer tooth pendant might mean you hunted your first buck. A fringe of woven grass could mark fertility or kinship or grief. A painted cape might not just protect you from the storm, it might tell a story about the last one. And the more you wear these things, the more you realize. The clothing remembers what you've done, even if others forget. But where did this all begin? Archaeologists have found shell beads in Blombo's cave, South Africa, over 75,000 years old. Tiny holes drilled by stone tools. Beads strung together, possibly sewn into garments or worn as necklaces. This wasn't just survival. This was meaning. In France, red ochre has been found near ancient burials, staining bones and skins. In Spain, eagle talons were filed and pierced, perhaps worn as ornaments. All across Ice Age Europe and Africa, pigment, pattern, and placement emerge not as accidents but intention. And behind intention is something even more profound: imagination. It's no longer enough for clothing to work. Now it has to say something. And someone had to invent that language. So who did? You may picture the hunter covered in furs, caked in blood, wielding a spear as the prototype for Ice Age innovation. But pause, look closer. The evidence tells another story. The earliest sewing tools, bone needles, awls, scrapers, are often found in female burial sites. In places like Sungir and Dalny Vestanis, women are buried with decorated garments, ivory beads, and tools for hide-working. These weren't just wearers. They were makers, engineers of the body, tailors of the soul. It's likely that women, while gathering, nursing, preparing, became the first clothing technologists. Through repetition, through pattern, through craft passed down across generations, they didn't just clothe the tribe, they shaped its social code. To stitch is to imagine, to tan hide is to remember, To decorate is to assert I was here, I mattered, I made something that outlasts the storm. And the storm, remember, is always coming. But now you don't face it alone. Because clothing isn't just wrapping anymore. It's community. It's tradition. It's a thread that ties you to the dead, the living, and the unborn. You begin to understand leopard fur means power. Soft rabbit means care. Dark stains near the hem could mark mourning, or womanhood, or initiation. You don't need books. You wear your mythology. And somewhere in your mind, behind the instincts and the heat and the hunger, a new idea flickers. What if clothing could hide more than skin? What if it could hold memory, emotion, identity, secrets too deep for language? So you keep sewing, and the lines between utility and beauty blur. You no longer make things just to survive. You make them to belong, to impress, to seduce, to challenge, to remember. This is the tailoring mind, the moment when Homo sapiens didn't just adapt to the Ice Age. You redefined it. But that power comes with a cost, because once your clothing becomes a mirror of who you are, it can also become a mask. And next, you'll face what happens when identity clashes with survival, when tradition locks horns with necessity, when a warming world forces your people to ask, what do we take with us, and what do we leave behind? You aren't alone anymore. You haven't been for years. Small hands pull at the edge of your tunic, a question in their eyes before they even speak. You remember that look. You had it once when the world was still a blur of snow and shadows and warm bodies pressed together at night. But now you are the warm body, the one who remembers, the one who must pass it down. Because it's not enough for you to survive the cold. Your children must, and their children, or everything, every stitch, every hunt, every clever act of defiance against the ice dies with you. So you kneel. You show them how to cut the hide not too shallow or the skin tears not too deep or you waste the fat. You place the scraper in their hands, guiding the pressure, feeling their hesitation turn to rhythm. There are no manuals, no drawings, only repetition, muscle memory, touch. You were never taught survival as a lecture. You were dressed into it. Your first lesson was warmth, the wrapping of fur around your newborn skin. Later came layers, boots lined with moss, belts tied tight to keep the wind from creeping in. You didn't know the names of the animals then, but you knew their textures. Coarse deer hide for soles, soft rabbit against your chest, thick bear for sleeping. Every material had meaning long before you understood words. Now it's your turn to pass that meaning on. And this is how it's done, not through speech but through doing, through shared hands on shared fabric, through the feel of sinew pulling tight through pierced hide, through the songs sung while stitching, steady as heartbeat. Because somewhere in the deep cold, long before agriculture, before writing, before cities, clothing became curriculum. You don't teach in schools, you teach around the fire, on the trail, during the hunt. Learning is embedded in daily life just as the knowledge is embedded in the clothing itself. You don't say, this is how to survive. You say, hold this. Pull it tight. Try again. Some days it's the elders teaching. Some days it's the children reminding the elders how something was done last season, last migration, last time the caribou failed to come. Memory lives in many mouths. And when a child finishes their first piece, a boot that doesn't leak, a tunic that doesn't chafe, it's not just a garment. It's a rite, proof that they've joined the chain, that they can carry it forward. Experimental archaeology shows us the complexity of Ice Age garments, layers fitted to the contours of the human body, designed to flex and hold, to shield and breathe. These weren't crude wrappings. They were engineered systems, and someone had to learn how to make them over and over again. Even now, in cold indigenous cultures like the Inuit, Yupik, and Evenki, we see echoes of that ancestral education. A child doesn't simply wear clothes. They learn to read them. They know which furs hold best against wet snow. They know how to hang a tunic to keep its shape. They know how to listen when the thread starts to weaken, when the garment tells you it's near the end of its life. In your time, nothing is wasted. Not the meat, not the bone, not the story embedded in a coat passed down through 5 winters. Your cloak may be stitched from 10 animals, but it holds the fingerprints of dozens, the ones who taught you, helped you, laughed when you made it too tight, cried when you wore it into the storm anyway. That's the thing about survival. It's not individual, it's inherited. And in that sense, clothing is more than a physical object. It's a social contract, a memory loop, a living document of human continuity. Sometimes when you patch a torn sleeve, you think of your mother's hands doing the same, and hers, and hers, a matriline of warmth extending back through the glacial dark. You may never see their faces again, but you wear them. And in turn, your children will wear you. One day, your daughter will pull a needle through fur and tie it off with the knot you showed her. She won't remember the first time you taught her, or why you made her redo it, but her hands will remember. And one day, long after you're gone, a great storm will rise across the ice fields, and someone will walk into it, clothed not just in leather and sinew, but in you. This is the true architecture of human survival. Not just innovation, not just warmth, but legacy. Passed hand to hand, fur to fur, stitch by careful stitch. You are no longer merely surviving the Ice Age. You are raising the ones who will outlive it. And soon they'll face a world that changes faster than the old ways can keep up. Because survival isn't static, and the climate is shifting. So the next question isn't just how to pass on knowledge. It's how to adapt it, and whether what you've taught them will be enough. You feel it before you see it. A numbness creeping into your toes, not the dull ache of tired feet. This is different, a spreading silence inside your flesh. You stamp the ground trying to bring them back, but nothing answers. Then comes the panic. Because you know what this means. A seam has split, or a thread gave way in the night. Maybe snow crept in while you slept. Maybe you didn't tie the wrappings tight enough. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore because at -40 degrees C, a maybe is already too late. Your boot is wet. The hide has frozen. You've begun to lose yourself. This is the unspoken law of the ice. Your clothing is not a style. It's not an accessory. It is your last, thinnest barrier between warm life and the slow, deliberate teeth of the cold. And it can fail. It does fail. Sometimes it's a small error, a careless moment, a needle hole made too wide, a tendon pulled too tight and left to crack in dry air, a thread fraying that no one noticed until it came undone during the crossing. Then the wind finds its way in. Water seeps, then freezes. And suddenly, the clothing you trusted, the armor you wrapped your life in, betrays you. But sometimes it's not a mistake of the hand. It's a mistake of the mind. A poor decision, trusting fur over function, choosing the beautiful hide over the thick one, wearing reindeer skin in wet snow instead of sealskin, picking a material because it felt good in camp but not where you're going. And then there are the ones who never come back. You've heard stories, sometimes around the fire, sometimes in silence, of those who tried to follow the herd too late in the season, of families caught in a sudden freeze, of the young hunter whose boots delaminated 2 days from shelter, of mothers who gave their coats to children. They're not myths. Their bodies are still here, locked in the ice, whispering through time. The forensic data tells it clearly. Ice-mummified remains like Ötzi show clothing patched and repatched, layered with intention, but also signs of wear, overuse, emergency repair. Sometimes the seams didn't hold. Sometimes they did, but the cold still won. Others, like the Siberian burials in Yana or Sungir, are clothed with astounding care, their furs arranged with precision. But even that wasn't always enough, because no matter how well you dress, the storm doesn't care. You can do everything right and still fall. That's what makes this world so brutal, and what makes every stitch a gamble. You remember the elders saying, "Fear the cold, but fear false confidence more." Even in modern cold-adapted cultures, from Inuit to Sami, failure of clothing is seen as the line between life and oblivion. Stories are told of the man whose parka seam ripped in a blizzard and was dead before he could turn back, or the child whose mitten was lost, not to wolves, not to hunger, but to the wind. And science confirms it. Exposed skin in sub-zero wind chill loses heat 25 times faster. Hypothermia doesn't strike like lightning, it drips in. Quiet, inevitable. First you shiver, then you forget why you should. Then your body shuts down the parts that don't matter, hands, feet, outer limbs, to save the core. But when your garments fail, even the core can't hold. You stop making good decisions, you get sleepy, you sit, you stop, and then you don't start again. That's why every culture who ever lived with the ice became obsessed with maintenance. Stitching wasn't seasonal, it was ritual. Drying hides over smoke wasn't optional, it was sacred. Children were taught not just how to make clothing, but how to keep it alive, because if it dies, so might you. And now, as you sit by the fire, fixing the boot you nearly lost your foot in, something shifts inside you. You no longer take your coat for granted. You no longer see clothing as something you wear. You see it as something you partner with, a fragile contract, a daily negotiation with death. You remember the cold, but you remember the mistakes more. Because they taught you what comfort never could. That survival is less about strength and more about respect. for the materials, for the process, for the limits, and most of all for the cold, the patient predator, always watching, always waiting for you to forget. But you won't forget again, because the storm isn't over, and your clothing, your second skin, must hold, or nothing else will. And somewhere out there, the temperature is still dropping, the wind is shifting, and the ice is about to test you one more time. You thought it was just you, just your tribe huddled under the aurora, stitching hides by firelight, whispering prayers into the seams, just your fingers cracking in the cold, your children wrapped in sinew and hope. But now the wind shifts. It carries with it something older, something broader. Voices not yours, songs not in your tongue, but familiar all the same. You were never alone in this cold. You were part of something larger, a constellation of peoples scattered across continents, all solving the same riddle. How do you keep warmth in when the earth itself seems built to bleed it out? You step into another world, far northeast, where the sky hangs heavy over the Siberian tundra. The Yakut are preparing for a journey. Their reindeer coats are layered and stitched with uncanny precision, outer fur facing out, inner hide softened with fish oil and smoke, boots packed with dry grass for insulation, gloves double-wrapped, faces covered with masks of fur so no skin meets air. Every piece is a calculation, every layer an equation of breath and blizzard. You don't speak their language, but you understand what's happening. This isn't just survival. It's geometry, warmth engineered. Then, thousands of kilometers away, you find yourself among the Sami, the reindeer herders of northern Scandinavia. You watch them cut patterns into hides with intuitive brilliance. Their Gakti clothing flows with form and function. Thick tunics, dense belts, fur-lined boots with curled toes to glide into snowshoe loops. Their hoods are not just protection, they are memory. Passed down, modified, reinvented. And then there's the Inuit, whose ancestors faced a cold so brutal it swallowed oceans whole. They didn't just survive, they thrived. They turned animal into architecture, not only building igloos from snow, but transforming skin into weatherproof mastery. Seal intestines stretched into translucent parkas, light, flexible, nearly waterproof. Caribou fur with its hollow hairs layered in two directions, fur in for warmth, fur out to shed wind and snow. Snow goggles carved from bone, slit thin enough to reduce blindness from sun off ice. They invented the cold weather parka before synthetics existed. They knew what modern science would learn millennia later. That layering wasn't just about stacking garments. It was about managing moisture, airflow, and breath. And they knew something else, something less visible. That a coat wasn't just a tool, it was a spirit. You sit in an Inuit camp and you hear it. The elders say garments carry names. They carry lineage. A parka might be stitched in silence, with intention. Some were buried with their owners. Others passed on like stories, like songs. To lose a mitten wasn't just a risk to your fingers. It was a rupture in the line between the living and the dead. Across these cultures, one thread remains constant. Clothing was sacred. In Mongolia's Altai Mountains, you watch ancient peoples wrap themselves in felted wool, insulating even when wet, layered with silk traded from afar. In the Andes, the cold was ice age anymore, but it was high. Thin air punishing chill, and still the same principles. Layers, knowledge, ritual. Everywhere the cold went, culture followed. Not in spite of it, but because of it. And now you realize something deeper. This wasn't an arms race between humans and the environment. It was a conversation. Each stitch was a word. Each adaptation a reply. The earth would speak in wind and frost and silence. And humans answered with bone awls, with fur-lined ingenuity, with the elegance of shared struggle. But no one person had all the answers. That's the myth. The truth is softer, more powerful. It took all of us. Across thousands of years and millions of frozen footsteps, we built a distributed intelligence, a cold-weather wisdom not bound by borders, but by blood and breath. What worked in one place evolved in another. What failed in one camp taught another tribe to never repeat the same mistake. From the Nenets to the Chukchi, from the Ainu to the Evenki, from the Cree to the Yaghan, we were sharing, even when we didn't know each other existed. Clothing became the medium, memory became the map. And you, standing here now, dressed in pieces inspired by all these ancestors, begin to see your outfit differently. It's no longer just something you made. It's a mosaic of many minds. It carries fingerprints from across the ice. Your coat is part Siberian. Your boots part Arctic. Your hood your thoughts, shaped by thousands of voices whispering across time. The wind picks up again. But you don't flinch. Not anymore. Because now you know. You were never just one person against the elements. You were and still are a chorus of survival, stitched into something greater. And the thread is still unbroken. You wake to a silence you don't recognize. No wind howling across the steppes, no brittle crack of frost beneath your feet. The sky is soft, almost forgiving. There's moisture in the air, not ice. Green flickers where there should be white. You look down at your clothes, thick, fur-lined, still carrying the scent of smoke and sinew. But suddenly they feel wrong, too heavy, too loud. The warmth they offer is no longer precious. It's excessive. The world is changing, and you can feel it first in your skin. The ice age is ending. Not in a flash, but in a slow, relentless sigh. Glaciers, once towering as mountains, begin their long retreat. Rivers swell with meltwater. Forests rise where tundra once ruled. Herds scatter. Hunting paths vanish beneath trees. You are no longer in a world carved by cold. You are in a world blooming, waking, and demanding something new. The change comes not just from what you feel outside, but in what you must become inside. Your clothes, once your armor, begin to shift. You no longer need layers thick enough to block bone-splitting wind. You no longer sleep in hides piled like fortresses. Now you need flexibility, breathability. You start to weave grass fibers, then flax. Linen emerges scratchy at first, but light, quick to dry, easier to move in. The animals change too. The great mammoth herds vanish into memory. Caribou migrate northward. You turn to sheep, not just for meat, but for wool. The first soft warmth that grows back. You learn to spin it. The first looms appear, not in thunder or brilliance but in patience. Threads wrapped and crossed, over and over, until fabric becomes something woven by time itself. You watch as your people sit in circles, not stitching skins, but tying future to present with every pass of the shuttle. It's a different kind of survival now. And with it comes something strange, extravagance. A tunic dyed with plants that don't grow in your valley, embroidered patterns that serve no thermal function, jewelry worn not for ritual but for presence. Clothes now speak a new language, not of weather but of want. For the first time, you see people wear to impress, not just to endure. But with comfort comes forgetfulness, and with forgetfulness, loss. There are fewer people who remember how to scrape a hide clean with obsidian, fewer still who know how to sew sinew without snapping it. The awls grow dull. The bone needles vanish into the dust. You start to hear stories not from memory but from myth. Once, they say, our ancestors wore fur and walked with the mammoths, but it's distant now, romantic, untethered from the rawness it once carried. You begin to wonder, what have we traded for softness? The cold forged you. It forced your mind to sharpen, your hands to learn, your body to adapt. Every stitch of your old coat held knowledge not written but lived. And now, your new garments are beautiful, yes. They drape and flow and sparkle. But do they teach you anything? Do they demand anything from you at all? As the earth warms, humanity multiplies. Settlements rise. Agriculture replaces the hunt. Clothing, once a matter of hours and urgency, becomes a craft of seasons, then of luxury. But under the layers of dyed linen and tasseled wool, something ancient still breathes. There are days when the weather turns unexpectedly and an old chill runs through the valley. And on those days, you reach for the old fur cloak kept in a corner, tattered but trusted. It smells of smoke and memory. It reminds you, there was a time when every garment was a question of life or death. Now you dress differently, but the echo remains. Because clothing never stopped being storytelling. Only now the story has changed, from survival to expression, from instinct to invention. But the root, the need to wrap yourself in meaning, that remains. The storm is over. But what it left behind, that still lives in you, in the way your fingers linger on a thread, in the shape of a hood you still pull tight when the wind picks up, in the old knowledge buried beneath softness, waiting to be remembered. And soon you'll need it again, because even warmth comes with a price. And the climate never stays still. You stand in the middle of a crowded street. Neon signs blink above you. Concrete pulses with heat beneath your shoes. You're wearing synthetic fibers spun in distant factories, zippers forged in steel, fabrics dyed in hues no wild animal has ever known. And yet, when the wind shifts, something deep inside you flinches. You pull your coat tighter, instinctively. You're not in the ice age, but your body never got the message. Because underneath the fleece, the denim, the nylon, beneath even the skin, you are still dressed in memory. When the air cools, the hairs on your arms rise, not for style, not for awareness, but because long ago that tiny lift of hair helped trap heat against your body. Goosebumps, the ghost of a fur coat you never grew. Your shiver isn't just discomfort, it's alarm. A siren built into your flesh that says, move, shelter, warmth, now. You still huddle with others on cold subway benches. You still wrap your baby tight in a swaddle, not because you've read a guidebook on thermoregulation, but because a million mothers before you wrapped their infants in hide, and those who didn't pass on their genes. You crave softness. You press fleece to your cheek and sigh. You nest in thick blankets as winter looms outside your window. You might call it comfort, but comfort, too, is evolution. Your nervous system recognizes certain textures as safety, a pelt, a lining, a survival signal remembered by nerves older than agriculture. You have central heating now, but your habits haven't changed. You still hang coats by the door. You still stockpile sweaters as if preparing for the hunt. You still build winter wardrobes, seasonal rotations, thermal hierarchies, base layer, insulation layer, shell, because somewhere in your lineage, someone learned to layer fur, then hide, then sinew-bound windbreakers. They survived, and their survival became ritual. Even your fat knows the cold. Some of it wraps your organs, not for energy, but for insulation. Your blood vessels constrict in your fingers and toes when the temperature drops, redirecting heat to the core, just like it did when you were sleeping in a cave, wrapped in bare hide, one ember away from death. But it's not just biology. You dream in temperature. You walk through snow and feel ancient anxieties, not of commutes or icy sidewalks, but of predators, of frostbite, of firewood too damp to burn. Cold doesn't just touch you. It awakens something inside you, a memory that isn't yours and yet entirely is. Even your aesthetics are haunted by Ice Age instincts. Why does a fur-lined hood make you feel powerful? Why do you admire parkas built for the Arctic, even when you'll never see a glacier? Why does wool feel noble, primal, as if it connects you to some lost dignity? Because your ancestors didn't wear fashion. They wore survival. And every piece you put on, every scarf, every glove, every quilted coat, is a descendant of that original technology. You are wrapped not in cloth, but in lineage. Walk through the city and look closer. That man tightening his coat collar in the wind, that's an echo. That child laughing beneath a pile of blankets, that's tradition. That woman checking the sky before grabbing her jacket, that's ancestral calculation, weather watching embedded in DNA. And you even now, you are scanning the horizon. Not for mammoths, not for storms, but for something colder, something deeper. Maybe it's the part of you that remembers when being underdressed meant dying quietly in the dark. Maybe it's the ghost of survival that no thermostat can silence. Or maybe it's just your skin whispering its secrets. Because you were never just a brain wrapped in skin. You were a creature wrapped in memory. And your clothing, even now, is not decoration. It's inheritance. So the next time you bundle up, pause. Feel the fabric between your fingers. Let the warmth settle on your shoulders. And listen to what your DNA is still saying. You are still here. You are still learning how to survive. And you never stopped dressing for the ice. You thought this was a story about fur, about leather, about what cavemen wore when the snow came down and the wind screamed like a dying animal. But it was never about clothing, was it? It was about what it means to survive. Because when you stood in the cave with nothing but skin between you and extinction, the question wasn't what should I wear? The question was how do I protect everything I love from disappearing into the frost? You didn't wear clothes, you forged them. You bled for them, you burned for them, you buried your dead in them. Clothing wasn't fabric. It was memory made solid, the soft weight of your mother's hands teaching you to stitch sinew, the ache in your arms as you scraped hide by moonlight, the whisper of animal breath before the spear landed. And those skills didn't vanish. They traveled one stitch at a time through every generation that came after, passed from hand to hand, folded into ritual, etched into bone. That fur-lined parka you wear to cross a frozen parking lot. It's not just modern convenience. It's a translation of mammoth hide capes, of stitched reindeer leggings, of smoked caribou skin treated with brains and prayer. Your gloves are sewn from the same impulse as the first wrapped feet trudging across glacial plains. Your scarves echo the warmth of communal furs shared around Ice Age fires. Every garment you pull tight when the air turns sharp is your body remembering something it once couldn't afford to forget. And maybe that's what matters now. Because the cold is different today, gentler, more distant, but the feeling remains. You still reach for warmth not just with your hands but with your instincts. You still fear exposure not just to weather but to loss. You still crave the layer between you and chaos. Something that says, I'm not alone. I am prepared. I belong to something older than myself. This wasn't a documentary about ancient people. This was a mirror. Because you are still them. You are still the child learning to tie knots by firelight. Still the mother double-stitching a hood for her son. Still the elder showing the tribe how to tell which hide will freeze and which will flex. You are not naked. You never were. You were wrapped in knowledge, in ancestry, in stories that never needed words, only thread and time and the will to endure. And when the next storm comes, because it always does, you'll reach for your coat. You'll pull the zipper up, check the seams, maybe add one more layer just to be safe. And somewhere deep inside, something ancient will exhale in relief. Because the cold came for you once, but you were ready. And the truth is, you still are.